When you think of the job of a public address announcer and all the things that they have to announce over the course of a game, there's probably a lot of things that come to mind. Of course, you've got the result of the play, including the down, the distance, who made the play, who made the tackle, how many yards it got, and everything like that. You've got the sponsored reads that they have to hit. You've got the team introductions and the starting lineups. You've got things to pump up the crowd and keep the energy alive. You've got score updates from elsewhere around the league, the announcement of the national anthem and presentation of the colors, various safety things and reminders. You get the idea. Public address announcers have had to announce a lot of things over the years at NFL games, to the point where I don't think anything is out of the realm of possibility for them. Except maybe this. Because this player that you've been watching this entire time is Tate Randle, the safety on the Indianapolis Colts. And during a 1985 game against the New York Jets, he was the center of attention, not because of what he did on the field, but rather because of what happened off of it. We've seen plenty of players whose girlfriends and wives are going to labor skip the game in order to be there for the birth of their child, which is 100% their choice and is 100% the right thing to do, because you want to be there when your own son or daughter is born, even if Bud Adams might not agree with that thought process. However, what happens if a player decides to play in the game instead of being there for the possibility that his wife or girlfriend is going to give birth? And then, in the middle of the game, the big moment happens. Well, that's exactly what happened to Colts safety Tate Randle. And we're going to break it down today. Because it's not often that a player starts the game as a member of a family of two and leaves it as a member of a family of three, and gets a new addition to the family literally while playing in the game. Because this is the story behind Tate Randle, and one of the craziest in-game moments in the history of the NFL that you've never heard of. Be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. We post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one. And I would really appreciate your support as we try and grow this community of football lovers and historians even more. So thanks in advance for liking and subscribing. And with that in mind, let's talk about the Who's Your Daddy moment at the Hoosier Dome. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand the game that this was taking place in, the importance of said game, and how the game was going. It's November 3rd, 1985. It's week 9 of the NFL season, and we find ourselves at the Hoosier Dome up in Indiana for this game between two divisional rivals in the AFC East, the New York Jets and the Indianapolis Colts. This is an important game for both of these teams for two very different reasons. For the Jets, they find themselves atop the AFC East, and even atop the AFC, sitting at 6-2 after winning 6 of their last 7 games. However, they don't exactly have a lot of breathing room atop the division, as the Miami Dolphins and the New England Patriots both find themselves at 5-3, one game behind, and with both teams playing each other this week in a game that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Win this game, and you maintain your hold on first place in the division. Lose this game, and all of a sudden, you find yourself in a dogfight for that division lead, and even a possible playoff spot, seeing as there are 5 teams in the AFC who have at least 5 wins, and none of them are in the AFC Central, meaning that these 5 teams are fighting for just 4 spots. For that reason, this game is a must-win for the Indianapolis Colts, who are below 500 and absolutely have no room for error. Lose this game and drop your 3rd in your last 4, and your chances of making the playoffs are virtually non-existent. This is not the time for the Colts to lay an egg. Unfortunately for them, that's exactly what they did, as the Colts got absolutely destroyed, losing by a final score of 35-17. And the game wasn't even that close, seeing as the Colts trailed at 35-3 at the half, with that being the biggest halftime deficit in Colts history at the time, and to this day, being the second biggest halftime deficit in franchise history, only being better than opening day of the 2011 season when the Colts were down 34-0 to the Houston Texans at the halftime break, in a game that would set the tone for that disastrous 2011 campaign. The Colts had no answers whatsoever for Jack quarterback Ken O'Brien, who finished the game going 16 for 25 with 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a passer rating of 122.3. And they also had no answers for Freeman McNeil, the incredible Jet running back who had 149 rushing yards in what was another fine day for the Pro Bowl back and the former AP first-team All-Pro just a few years prior in 1982. Offensively, the Colts got nothing going at all. They had just 53 yards rushing on under 3 yards a carry. They turned it over 5 times, losing the turnover battle, and with their quarterbacks getting sacked a combined 7 times. Nothing that the Colts did on this day worked. They stunk offensively, they stunk defensively, especially in the first half, and they lost any chance they had at making it to the playoffs after this atrocious performance. So this game did not go according to plan for almost everyone on the Colts. However, I say almost everyone, because that's not to say that someone wasn't smiling by the time this game ended, even though his team was on the losing side. And that man? That was this man right here, safety Tate Randle. Randall was drafted by the Miami Dolphins in the 8th round of the 1982 NFL Draft. He never made it onto the team. He found himself on the Houston Oilers later in the season, and 1 year later, after getting cut by the Oilers, found himself on the Baltimore Colts. The fact that he made the Colts was shocking. Randall and his wife were going to move to Lubbock, Texas later in the week, and Randall only packed 1 pair of clothes, thinking that he would be back in Texas immediately after. As for Randall's time with the Colts, it was definitely a mixed bag, even if he stayed on the roster throughout the mid-1980s. There were some moments where he intercepted quarterbacks and made some critical tackles in the second level. Randall actually finished second on the Colts in interceptions during the 1984 season, and had a pick during a game against the St. Louis Cardinals, in a game that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. There were also a lot of moments where Randall got burnt badly and allowed touchdowns. Indianapolis never had a good defense while Randall was there, and while he wasn't the only reason for the defensive struggles that the team had, he definitely didn't help matters much, I'll put it that way, as there's a reason he was in and out of the starting lineup, regardless of who the coach was. Regardless, by this point in 1985, Randall was in his 4th season in the league, and there was a big thing about to happen in his life, as in, perhaps the biggest thing that can happen to someone. Tate Randall was about to become a father. Randall and his wife, Gail, didn't have any kids prior to this, so they were about to become parents for the first time. Now you would think that Tate would want to be there for the birth of his child, especially since this was the first one. However, for whatever reason, he was not. Gail and Tate got along great, so this wasn't like this was a relationship on the rocks or anything along those lines. Gail and Tate are still together to this day, so they've been together for well over 40 years at this point. I don't know if this was because the baby was premature and Tate wasn't expecting Gail to give birth in the middle of the game, or I don't know if Tate knew that this was a possibility and felt as though he owed it to his team to play in the contest, especially since he was the backup by this point and skipping a game could mean the end of his career. It's all speculation, and again, this was the 1980s, so it was different than what life is today in the 2020s. What we do know is that while Gail was in the delivery room, Tate was on the field at the Hoosier Dome, witnessing firsthand his team face its largest halftime deficit in franchise history. At halftime of the game, while head coach Rod Dowhower was chewing out his team for that atrocious performance, this man right here, Tate Randall, was making a call to the hospital, seeing how everything was going. And as he spoke with a doctor on the phone, he realized, oh crap, this is actually going to happen today. Said Randall, I made a call at halftime, and I knew then something was going to happen real soon. I was worrying. By this point, the game was over. A 35-3 deficit at the half had never been overcome before in the history of professional football, especially before the 2-point conversion, meaning that this was a 5-score game and not a 4-score game. So by this point, Randall was worrying about one thing and one thing only, the birth of his son. And during the second half of the contest, while Randall was on the sidelines, he found out the big news. The delivery was successful. His wife had just given birth to a 6-pound, 12-ounce boy, who they were going to name Austin Tate. As Tate said on this, he was born a Hoosier, but he wanted to give him a Texas name. Already, this story is kind of insane, seeing as a player literally became a father mid-game and was not there to witness the birth of his own child. However, making this even more insane was the fact that he found out not from his wife, not from a team official, not from a loved one, or not from anyone like that. Want to know how Tate found out that he was going to be a dad? He found out via the public address announcer at the Hoosier Dome. I am not even making that up. While he had a feeling at halftime that something was about to happen, and this was going to be the moment that his life would change forever, Tate found out from the public address announcer that it had happened. As his mother-in-law and now grandmother for the first time, Barbara Roberson, said on the public address announcer making the announcement, this was the first Tate knew about it. Just imagine that. Imagine hearing, today's 50-50 raffle number is 55546. Congratulations to ticket number 55546. Fans, make sure you have a designated driver, as Budweiser encourages you to drink responsibly. Also, we'd like to congratulate Tate Randall for becoming a father, as his wife just gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Like, can you imagine that? What on earth is going on here? There are so many questions, from why you wouldn't be there for the birth of your own son, which, amazingly enough, is not the craziest NFL-related birth story I've uncovered, as I found one from the 1960s that I need to share at some point, to why the freaking public address announcer is saying this first in front of the 60,000 fans of the Hoosier Dome, as everyone's finding out the news at the same time in what feels like a public proposal, but a million times worse. You would think Tate would want the news addressed privately first, but I guess not. And if you're wondering how it sounded on the broadcast, because NBC got wind of this, this is the incomparable announcing team of Don Criqui and Bob Trumpy commenting on the news late in garbage time.
It was an 83.
And we just got word from our truck. Ken Edmondson told us that Tate Randall's wife just gave birth to a son at about 25 minutes ago here in Indianapolis. So you can understand why Tate Randall might be thinking someplace else.
So the Colts do have something to celebrate.
Yes, they do.
Number 35 does. Congratulations to Mrs. Randall and Tate and the whole Randall family. And right now, the Jets look to run the clock. It's down to 2:30 and running.
Here's
Tate Randall.
There's Tate Randall. Congratulations, Dad.
For what it's worth, football ran in the family. Tate passed his love of football on to his kid, as Austin Randall seems to have done really well for himself. Austin Randall played linebacker at Air Force in the mid-2000s, then served in the Air Force for 7 years, even being a mission commander for nearly 4 years. Today, even though Randall no longer plays football, he coaches high school football down in Texas, and not only seems super happy with what he does, but has a wife and a kid of his own. So Tate, despite not being there for the birth of his own son, seems to have raised one heck of a son. And I should also note that this Colts-Jets game was a 4 o'clock start time. It did not have to be that way, as of the first 7 home games that the Colts had, in a cruel twist of fate, this was, quite literally, the only one that started at 4 o'clock Eastern. If this was a 1 o'clock start time, Tate could have played in the game and made it to the hospital for the birth of his son. The 4 o'clock start time screwed him over from being able to do both. November 3rd, 1985 was one of the worst halves in the history of the Indianapolis Colts. November 3rd, 1985 was one of the greatest days in the life of Tate Randall, as the result of the contest was insignificant. I have to wonder if, 40 years later, he regrets not being there, and regrets being on the sideline for the game instead of being in the delivery room, especially seeing how the game itself went. Regardless, it makes for an interesting story that I'm not sure how many times we'll see happen again, seeing as, number one, the timing has to be perfect, as the birth has to occur in a 3-hour window of a 168-hour week. And number two, not many players are missing the birth of their firstborn to play in a football game. Tate Randall is best known today as an NFL player, not for what he did on the field, but rather for what his wife did off the field while he was on it. Because on this day, while the Jets were definitely the Colts' daddy in the first half, Tate Randall became a dad of his own. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.